Yeah, so I'm gonna, I guess the intro briefly is that I'm an experiential designer. I've been doing that for a lot of years, and that's like a fancy way of saying I specialize in user experience and UI. And as a founder, I've worn a lot of hats over the years, but the key one has been developer. I've done a ton of work in Unity and Unreal, and really see myself in the Web3 space doing metaverse like stuff in the future, but I'm developing a lot of infrastructure now, and we're going to see some of that today in a really fun way. So Higuana, I'm going to share my screen. Let me go for this. Go live. All right. So first I'm going to go through these handful of slides. Then I'm going to show you a web UI. Then I'm going to show you what's happening on the back end real quick, and then a word about lore. And I'm pretty sure I could squeeze it all in because I'll go through it quick. So also the post-apocalyptic slides will make sense soon. My project is called Bitcoin Heroes, and I'm using LAMBDA smart contracts to control generative AI on the back end. It's kind of a new take on ordinals recursion, or inspired by recursion. When I first learned about recursion, it changed the way I thought. To have a decentralized CDN is really powerful, and it's a feature of ordinals that's not really exploited that much. So I knew a long time ago I was going to be doing a lot with recursion. This is a tech demo of a feature from a greater project called Superfan. I'm using generative AI to help people build their own projects and build profile pages on our platform. But when the hackathon came up, it's like, all right, cool, fun opportunity to get down with the degens. So we're using this as a way to stress test what we've been working on by doing a collection with some background, with some lore, with some sci-fi element, and it's really going to help us shoot some holes in the bigger project. So the way it works is you choose a faction. There's 4 factions in this game. You build your team by creating characters, and at the bottom are examples of these characters. These are super high resolution, super high fidelity, and we're not inscribing the images, of course, on Bitcoin. That would be super irresponsible, right? So the inscriptions on LAMBDA act as parameters, kind of act like commands in a really efficient text inscription to control stable diffusion on the back end. And this is the way in which it's like recursion, because we're dumping out to a containerized and portable backend that's not inscribed itself, but can be decentralized. And from there, once it's inscribed, it's immutable. This is your team, and then the storyline unfolds. Then we fight to take the planet. The Bitcoin Heroes story unfolds via on-chain data, and this is a nod to you guys at Blockrunner. You've always done a really good job of stressing why non-arbitrary data is important, and I'm with you on that. The storyline itself, we provide some background to the story, we provide some plot points, but it will the authorship of the story will always be generated by what's happening on chain. So one quick example could be that, let's say, I know you guys are from down south, so let's say in Texas, a lot of people are kind of all choosing the human faction, right? And that is, it's not too fun if all factions have the same difficulty level when everybody's on Team Human. So we'll know, because of what we're indexing, that the humans should have a harder way to get rewards. And maybe it's the Cthulhuans, or maybe it's the aliens, the different factions in the story that have an easier time to get rewards. Another way to look at this is macro stuff. So if something happens with government, or with whatever's happening in Bitcoin news that's either driving transaction fees or a dip, those kinds of things can also drive what's happening in story. So this is where it gets really fun for me, because it's like a choose your own adventure book, except you're not choosing the adventure, the chain is, and something that's part of the tech demo side of this is that I came up with the name anomalies for this, but it's anomalies are where everyone's inscriptions can be affected by universe-wide events. So what I'm showing down below is, like, imagine you have these characters in your wallet and you wake up Friday morning and all your characters are undead. They're all like in zombie mode. So maybe we interrupt the overall narrative, the overall story, to say this weekend you've got to go through these different steps to cure your team, or maybe they're stuck in zombie mode or stuck for a certain amount of time. And the way we built this out, it's really easy to do these kinds of tricks. So and by the way, all these slides were created by the same engine that we built to be controlled by inscriptions. I only had to tweak it a little to do these backgrounds. So I'm going to jump now to so there's misspellings here. This is barely a web UI, but I can show you how quickly generations happen. So choose a trait, hit generate, and usually it takes 2 or 3 seconds, and we get output. And this is 2048 by 1536, so it's up-resed, and yeah, it's working now. Let me quickly jump into what's happening on the back end. So Stable Diffusion is all Python, right? And this is a web UI to basically creatively control the output Python script. And what we're looking at here, let me zoom out, I'll show you. So this is an example of a workflow to create characters. There's a base generation here. This is an upscaling. It looks the same until we start zooming into like the filigree stuff. Here's an example of that undead anomaly I was talking about, and then the upscaling. And what happens is this is what sits at the GPU instance, and I'll queue up a generation. Oh, it seems I broke something. Live demos, right? Here, let me quickly turn that back on. And so here we see a generation happening with this dude. He's going to become our base. This is slower because it's on my own local machine, and I don't have a beefy graphics card. And in a second, yeah. So generations start happening. I won't spend too much time on here, but this is what's happening on the back end, and it's via this interface that I start making game elements come to life. And then just real quick, I want to show you some of the log. Oh, you know what? I can show you this since we talked about. So these are the logs that just got created by the generations we did. And it's there if anybody wants to like hit pause later. And finally, last part of my presentation is just a little bit of a lore. I'm going to hit listen on a couple of these buttons, and this site's going to be merged with the UI tool. But this, I think you might get a real kick out of the background.
There have been events throughout time which have created huge waves of energy, a kind of spiritual pressure which can be catalysts for intense change. In 2009, one such event took place. Satoshi Nakamoto and a small team would unknowingly create a wave felt far and wide. They thought their experiments could change economies, but they ended up changing the universe.
Let me give you one more.
Some people are sensitive to such spiritual pressure. They would become physically imbued with abilities. The pressure wave was also felt deep in the ground. Recently deceased would become touched with this energy. Deeper yet, monsters forgotten to time. Terrible beings who make claim to all of Earth tragically receive this energy too. And much further away, inhabited planets are just now seeing the signal of this pressure wave and are now at the doorstep.
Yeah, so, and I'm clicking through some of the examples that I made in, when I was doing my development. But yeah, just to wrap up, I guess, it's sort of recursion. It's really efficient. It's based on inscriptions as a command set, and the smart contracts let us go deeper and do indexing with Lambda to kind of create a game state or read a game state. And yeah, we were building something towards this right anyway, but it's like, all right, game on. Let's create something that might get its own legs and might be a really fun kind of art project to get behind. And that's my presentation. Thanks.
Awesome, Alpay. Thank you so much for this. Just like I did for the BitSnap guys, I think there is something that is important to be added in here, which is how much of a comprehensive set of ideas that you brought to life here. I think it's important to give you guys a bit of a background that although Alpay has been working with a lot of these concepts from a tech perspective, a lot of what you saw today from a law perspective, from a for lore perspective, from a story perspective, from a narrative and so on, that came during this hackathon time. So the ability to create so much, and I would love him to, share the idea and the story with you guys afterwards, because I think it's very amusing. I'm not sure if you know Alpay, by the way. You still had plenty of time. I just wanted to make sure that the the story that you created gets the attention and the praising that it deserves, because it's a very nice story. The characters that you created are very interesting, and the level of detail on those things are unbelievable. Um, I guess one question from me is this something that you already wanted to work with, or did this idea came just because you realized that with Lambda you could play with this more complex imagery, and then add your story to it? Um,
Yeah, the 100%. Like, when I started learning about what we can do with Lambda, I mean, it's smart contracts, right? So it's kind of like it's a huge unlock. We can literally build anything, and I guess you go back a year, and when we first started hearing via ordinals, like we could do more with Bitcoin, that was interesting. But now fast forward, and we can start thinking about a lot more. And I was thinking about how to use inscriptions in different ways, and kind of where's my go-to-market built into that? Where's my growth hack built into that? But really, I think the magic's going to lie in the smart contracts themselves. Um, uh, Especially what I mentioned earlier about indexing becoming like a state machine. We never had that ability before. If you make a game that's not Web3 at all, there's a lot of work that goes into state machines. And then when you take it to massive multiplayer or a metaverse type thing, that gets even more complicated. But when you've got such high speed indexing and logic in smart contracts, it's kind of like, all right, we can actually do this on chain without hurting the chain.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Congratulations. And I know that this is just one of the many ideas that you have in your little books. I know that you are full of projects, and I know that you have a gigantic project in your hands in Superfan. So I really thank you for taking the time to take part in this and create something for us and with us. Um, I will open the floor to other questions. Judges, referees, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question and a few comments. I'll probably really impressed with what we saw here. I guess the one question is, how much of Bitcoin Heroes is like an application for users versus the technology that Bitcoin Heroes is using, like for us developers to use?
Yeah, great question. So it started as just a feature of the platform I'm building, but I started thinking this is kind of a superpower. So let's let people make their own collections. Let's let people have their own workflows on this back end. And that was kind of rattling around in my head for a while, but it wasn't until this hackathon it's like, let's do that now. So yeah, totally going to be a tool for others to use. For now, I think we get to test it with this game, and the game could live, maybe it won't, but the result will be that it's a web front end to create these stable diffusion collections.
Yeah, I like this because even though that you're generating these images and creating a game out of it, I think eventually it could be applied to the generation of assets for content in the metaverse and have those assets play along with the narrative. Like you were saying, all of a sudden your hero turns into a zombie and you have some sort of game narrative to heal, right? In some sort of way where the gameplay and the user has to interact with the environment to kind of go back to the way things were. And so applying that to the metaverse, I think there's a huge opportunity, especially for something like Bitmap, where you can't have a lot of the stuff happening on chain as much as much as you'd want.
Yeah.
But you can point to on-chain data, like you were using non-arbitrary data to affect content in the Bitmap metaverse.
Yeah.
And so this is like a pretty cool tool for creators out there who want to, make content for the virtual environment.
For the constraints of the metaverse too, where like, develop or deployment bandwidth is only so it's finite especially within the bitmap landscape. Like each parcel has a finite cap of space, right? So to maximize the value of that developer bandwidth, making content dynamic and generative makes a lot of sense. Like you're saying,
Yeah.
when you're deploying an application, it doesn't have a single purpose. If it has this in the back end, you can now dynamically generate different use cases, different application environments that support different types of game logic and stuff like that. So that's really important. Sounds like this super powerful potential primitive for the metaverse, like Wilson.
So to generate some of these assets, do you have to have a powerful computer locally, or what is the bottleneck for generating, beyond just the images? Is it the large language models? What's the bottleneck?
Yeah, so basically, I'm on an RTX 2080 here on my local machine. It's fine to work on, and then everything runs on much faster GPUs. And I think I should add, I might mention value, right? So I don't think you could do this 6 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago, because latent consistency models hadn't come out yet. Compute is costly, but very recently, new LCM models have arrived, which let us do this stuff in far less steps. So it means my 2080 just got way more usable, and it means that the ability to run this as a backend finally has the ability to wrap an idea around it that's not going to cost a ton of money. It's actually something we could wrap a business model around. So I think anybody could sit down with this. There's a bit of a learning curve to use that front end that I was showing, but it's really not rocket science. I got into it pretty quickly, and I think most people can. At the end of the day, what I'm doing is taking what's inscribed, some plain text inscription, and parsing out text. So if we have a prompt that describes the scene, I'm taking some of that inscription and parsing out some of the terms. So that's how we get a different weapon. That's how we get a different stance. That's how we get a different background. And ideally, the web UI won't be what anybody needs to create. We'll handle that. You come up with the prompts that work, and you can keep re-rolling until you get where you want to be.
Yeah, really interesting. What did you say your background was?
Well, I've been a developer forever, but I run experiential design firms, and so I'm pretty focused on UX.
Okay, interesting. Okay, yeah, I think that covers all the questions. So how much does it cost, like today, to regenerate some of these images? Are we talking about like a few dollars, or are we talking about hundreds of dollars?
Not even. I've been doing generations all week, and my compute cost on my GPU instance was 3 cents. But that was seriously so different some months ago.
Yeah.
So you're running these models locally on your computer, right?
I'm doing development locally because it's snappier, but then I upload the Python that web front end outputs up to the GPU instance in the cloud.
Okay.
And by the way, that's portable, and that's by design, so we could decentralize this. I cannot inscribe, I cannot put Stable Diffusion on chain, and we wouldn't want to, because that's like gigs worth of models there. So that's why I say it's not exactly recursion like 3JS or P5 via on-chain monkey, right? But it's too heavy for that. But this is containerized so that we can put it on multiple cloud compute services with failover. And that means we're kind of doing a pseudo decentralization of it. It won't stop working when I stop paying a bill, right?
Interesting. Cool, man. Looking to very interested to kind of hear more about this and how everything rolls out. So, what's your kind of like what's your MVP for something like this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a 5-day-old hackathon, so I guess I'm not there yet, but all the hard work is done. So I think we're going to be able to do some testing with this background story really soon publicly. I hate to promise a date, but it's really just some web front end that's got to get done before we can do that. And then I think we'll learn how to build it out more to say we're ready for launch as a public tool.
Awesome. All right, man. I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more and following this project, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.